Israel pays its final respects to former President Shimon Peres.
From bad to worse, as Russia pursues its Aleppo offensive, the US is close to suspending Syria peace talks with Moscow. Breaking the embargo, claims that US presidential candidate Donald Trump illegally did business in Cuba.
It's farewell to Rosetta. The space mission is to come crashing to a close after more than 2 years of gathering information on Comet 67P.
With each day bringing more horror for Aleppo, the White House says President Obama and Germany's Angela Merkel have spoken by phone and condemned what it calls the barbarous Russian and Syrian regime airstrikes. As for peace talks,
the bombing of Aleppo right now is inexcusable. I think we're on the verge of suspending the discussion because it's irrational in the context of the kind of bombing taking place to be sitting there trying to take things seriously.
with a short-lived ceasefire over, Moscow, though, is vowing to press ahead with the Aleppo offensive. It says a solution is being hampered by a U.S. failure to distinguish moderate Syrian rebels from jihadist extremists. We underline once again the need for the separation of the so-called peaceful opposition from terrorists. We call firstly on the United States and all those in the region who have a relevant influence to come up with such a separation. Russia and its Syrian government allies say they're targeting only militants in Aleppo, but the US and EU say civilians, hospitals and aid workers are deliberately being struck. UNICEF says 96 children have been killed and over 200 more injured in Aleppo this week alone. These boys are playing in a bomb crater. Did Donald Trump breach the U.S. trade embargo on Cuba? A company controlled by the Republican presidential nominee is alleged to have tried to do business in the communist-run country in the late 1990s, despite the strict American ban. Trump's Democratic rival picked up on the story in Newsweek magazine.
Today, we learned about his efforts to do business in Cuba, which appear to violate U.S. law, certainly flout American foreign policy, and he has consistently misled people in responding to questions about whether he was attempting to do business in Cuba.
Newsweek says the Trump firm spent at least $68,000, not directly, but through an American consulting firm. The Trump campaign denies he did business in Cuba, saying Clinton should be under scrutiny.
She and her financial backers will say anything, do anything, lie about anything to keep their grip on power, to keep their control over this country. The American people have had it with years and decades of Clinton corruption and scandals.
With Trump widely seen as having lost this week's TV debate to Clinton, his supporters are frantically trying to drum up support for their candidate ahead of November's election.
A packed commuter train ploughed into a station in New Jersey at the height of Thursday morning's rush hour, bringing down part of the roof and scattering debris over the concourse. At least one person was killed and more than 100 others were injured. Witnesses described terrifying scenes as the front of the train smashed through the buffers at high speed. It continued through ticket barriers and into the concourse, toppling support pillars and creating chaos at one of the busiest transit hubs in the New York City area.
Once we got off, we noticed that people were stuck and they had to come out through the windows. The police were trying to rescue them, and the conductor came off and he was completely bloodied, and that's when we started to notice that there were more injuries, more severe. I just feel the strain from the impact, but nothing like what those people might be feeling.
I'm an engineer for freight. If I'm going 50 miles an hour, and if I hit a car or if I hit a person, I can go into emergency at 50 miles an hour with a 2-mile train. That train to go 1.5 miles before it stops. So, I mean, that's what trains do. They're not like cars, man. They keep going.
There were no immediate explanations for what caused the crash. The Federal Railroad Administration says its investigators are en route to the scene. The National Transportation Safety Board says it will send its major incidents team to investigate.
Ukraine has remembered the massacres 75 years ago at the Babi Yar ravine. In the space of 2 days, 33,771 Jews were slaughtered at the site on the outskirts of Kiev as part of what the Nazis saw as the final solution in Europe. Across autumn 1940,